Donald Trump has named Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General and one-time lawyer of Donald Trump's, as his pick for Attorney General. And we are told that this was not a surprise to some people around him, that he has been very close to Bondi for some time. She was a staple in his first administration. Since then, she has taken on many roles, MAGA adjacent, including taking over running his super PAC at one point. I do want to read to you part of the statement that he put out about Pam Bondi. He said, "I am proud to announce former Attorney General of the great state of Florida, Pam Bondi, as our next Attorney General of the United States." Then he goes into her biography, saying Pam was a prosecutor for nearly 20 years, where she was very tough on violent criminals and made the streets safe for Florida families. Then, as Florida's first female Attorney General, she worked to stop trafficking of deadly drugs and reduce the tragedy of fentanyl overdose deaths, which have destroyed many families across our country. She did such an incredible job that I asked her to serve in our Opioid and Drug Abuse Commission during my first term. We saved many lives. Then she goes on to say Pam will refocus the DOJ to its intended purpose of fighting crime and making America safe again. I have known Pam for many years. She is smart and tough and is an America First fighter who will do a terrific job as Attorney General. She is considered a Trump loyalist, but she's also considered somebody who is likely to be able to be confirmed. She is non-controversial as far as we know at this point, and that obviously is something that Donald Trump was looking for after his experience with Matt Gaetz.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Elliot Williams, our legal analyst, is here with us as well. So what does this pick of Pam Bondi tell you about Trump's thinking as far as an attorney general is concerned?
He's picked another person who's, as Kristen had said, a loyalist, somebody who's been in his orbit for quite some time. I will note she's at least been a prosecutor, a line prosecutor in Florida, and also a state attorney general. So she does come in with at least the modicum of prosecutorial experience that I think we as Americans ought to hope for out of an attorney general. But this is an individual who was, advised his impeachment team. He has clearly prized this form of loyalty in picking his attorney general this time.
So Trump taps Bondi for U.S. attorney general. Did you guys notice something when they were making the announcement? She is a Trump loyalist. Like they said that in the pejorative. But she is a Trump loyalist. She's part of that, mega crowd. They're doing that to disparage her, to discredit her, because that's all they had. Let me tell you, and this is just what I think. And there was speculation about this kind of early on. Matt Gaetz was a Tasmanian devil headed to the DOJ. That just would have been, everything would have been up for grabs, which the reason I loved it so much. But it showed something else, and that was who were the Republicans that went after Matt Gaetz. Because those are the Republicans we need to make sure we primary. So some people think, and I'm not saying I do, but it sure looks like 3D chess. Okay? Only because when you look at Pam Bondi, it's kind of like, wait a minute. Because it was like right after Matt Gaetz gets out, bam, she's in. It's like, well, if you had her on your short list, which clearly you did, you picked Matt Gaetz over Pam Bondi, a woman who actually argued for you in your impeachment trial, in charge of your super PAC? Come on. Why would you do that? Unless you know this is going to rustle some feathers, and I think we get to see who's actually loyal. I loved the pick. But when I see Pam Bondi, it's like, dude, this is like a major upgrade. Any of you out there who are, I wanted Matt Gaetz, trust me, this is a major upgrade. As great as Matt Gaetz is, Pam Bondi is several cuts above. She is a ridiculous border hawk. Okay? Like you're not coming across our border, sir, ma'am. So sorry, you can, I know, you got those little babies that need, bread and milk. You're not coming across our border illegally. We got 27 ports of entry. Pick one. That's Pam Bondi. I've seen her in news conferences where she was like, you came to the wrong county. You came to the wrong place. you had no idea what you were in, what was in store for you coming to this state. She's relentless. I wanted to cover this because, well, I really believe that the whole Matt Gaetz thing may have been already in the works. And Donald Trump was playing 3D chess. Again, if you had her on her short list, how do you pick Matt Gaetz, who's never been an attorney general for any state? How do you pick him over Pam Bondi? Unless you did it for a specific reason. So you can see all of the rhinos show their horns. All right. Now, guys, I'm about to show you something. And I got to kind of warn you ahead of time because, firstly, let me say this, and this is going to sound hyperbolic. I assure you it isn't. Your government is trafficking children. Let me say it again. I know it's going to sound hyperbolic. I assure you it isn't. Your government is trafficking children. It is interesting to me that all this attention on P. Diddy and all of these, demonic this and demonic that's demonic, and it's kind of like, okay. But I'm telling you right now, P. Diddy is low-level demonic. Stu, what are you talking about? Because what I'm about to show you, it was, by the way, it was right there for the entire country to see. For the entire country to see. The HHS secretary was grilled in Congress this week. This is going to make you ashamed of your government. I mean, this will, if you're like proud, you're proud. I love my government. It's like, this will probably disabuse you of that.
You've got a moral obligation to find out where that child lives and return them safely home. The last thing any decent person would do is to take that child to a stranger's house and leave them there. Yet it appears this is exactly what this administration has been doing for the last 4 years. In just 4 years, this administration has deliberately allowed 7.6 million illegal aliens to enter the United States, releasing more than 5.7 million illegal aliens into the country, while more than 1.9 million known gotaways evaded apprehension, an illegal population larger than the state of Arizona, our 14th largest state. And among them have been an estimated 530,000 unaccompanied alien minors. That's about the entire population of the state of Wyoming. Instead of protecting these children until they could be returned safely home or until their rightful families could be located, HHS deliberately circumvented protocols designed to protect these children and abandoned them to poorly vetted sponsors in the United States. The House Judiciary Committee estimates that roughly 150,000 of these children have now disappeared. They've simply vanished into a dark underworld of sex and drug trafficking, forced labor, gang activity, and crime. Of course, many are not helpless children, but rather teenagers or adults posing as teenagers who themselves present a mortal threat to the public. Take the case of Walter Xavier Martinez. He was transferred to the Office of Refugee Resettlement as an unaccompanied alien child, despite a previous arrest in El Salvador for illicit association with MS-13. One call to Salvadorian authorities would have confirmed this. Maryland authorities later noted that he had gang tattoos. Instead, Martinez was released. You've got a moral obligation to find out where that child lives. Previous arrest in El Salvador for illicit association with MS-13. One call to Salvadorian authorities would have confirmed this. Maryland authorities later noted that he had gang tattoos. Instead, Martinez was released into our country, no questions asked, and on July 27, 2022, he brutally attacked and killed Kyla Hamilton, who was sound asleep in her own bed. While the prime suspect in her murder, Martinez was placed in a foster home with other children and enrolled in a local high school. He has since admitted to 4 murders, 2 rapes, and additional other crimes. Juan Carlos Garcia Rodriguez from Guatemala, also fast-tracked into our country by this administration as an unaccompanied alien child and released to an unrelated sponsor who was himself an illegal alien. On August 12, 2023, he murdered 11-year-old Maria Gonzalez in her own home, wrapped her body in a trash bag, and stashed it under her bed for her father to find. We don't know how many more such monsters are among the 150,000 unaccompanied alien minors that HHS has lost track of, or how many helpless children have been abducted and exploited. But we are slowly finding out tragedy by preventable tragedy. What we know is that in 2021, Mr. Becerra removed the requirement that ORR provide biographic and biometric data for all adult members of a sponsor's household to check for criminal histories.
Okay, did you hear that last part there? Hang on, let me rewind this because this is telling. I don't know how you see this a different way. Your government was trafficking children.
Wrapped her body in a trash bag and stashed it under her bed for her father to find. We don't know how many more such monsters are among the 150,000 unaccompanied alien minors that HHS has lost track of, or how many helpless children have been abducted and exploited. But we are slowly finding out tragedy by preventable tragedy. What we know is that in 2021, Mr. Becerra removed the requirement that ORR provide biographic and biometric data for all adult members of a sponsor's household to check for criminal histories.
Why would you remove anything? Why do you remove anything that would ensure a safe environment for the children you're about to drop off? Why would you get rid of any measure there unless you're about to replace it with something stronger? Unless you want to make them vulnerable. You know, for all the talk about P. Diddy being some sort of demonic, you have demonic presence right here. Becerra is an absolute monster. How in heaven's name do you drop off a child and you don't even know that the place, in some instances, it's even worse?
What could possibly go wrong? Records produced by a whistleblower show that in 2021, HHS disregarded repeated warnings by a case manager about the MS-13 affiliation of one sponsor attempting to take custody of 2 unaccompanied alien children. According to the New York Times, Secretary Becerra berated employees for not processing minors fast enough, saying, quote, "If Henry Ford had seen this in his plant, he would have never become famous and rich. This is not the way you do an assembly line." In July 2021, concerned employees drafted a memo warning that labor, quote, labor trafficking was increasing and complaining that the agency had become, quote, one that rewards individuals for making quick releases and not one that rewards individuals for preventing unsafe releases. According to press reports, Mr. Becerra told then ORR Director Cindy Huang that, and I quote, if she could not increase the number of discharges, he would find someone who could. Huang resigned a month later. Now, the American people have already passed judgment on these policies in the recent election. But those responsible have much to answer for to the victims of their policies and to history. And we welcome the Secretary here today to account for his actions.
Tell me that we are not trafficking children. Just tell me. This, what we're doing with these unaccompanied minors from Guatemala, Venezuela, Honduras, Haiti, all of these unaccompanied minors are being put in places that are at best hellholes, at worst demonic sex trade, forced labor, gamble. It goes on and on and on. How does he do this? How does this guy get picked? Well, that's the reason he was picked. You may think, well, that's a detractor. That would be a mark against him. Not in this administration. You got to look at all of those unaccompanied minors like a conveyor belt. His words, not mine. His words. I want to point out, the only reason you know that is because of a whistleblower. You don't know it because he came clean. You don't know it because of an investigation. You know because of a whistleblower who had had enough. That it was nothing more than a conveyor belt. Get the minors in, get the minors out. Where they go and who they're with is not our concern. That's the reason he was chosen. They've done it to hundreds of thousands of children. Just let that sink in. And hundreds of thousands of children have been placed in these. You know, when I was in Bible college, one of my professors was really, you know, he was really fighting against, you know, human trafficking. And he showed us a film. And I got to tell you, it was difficult to stomach. You know, you see what's actually happening, you know, and you have, you know, video foot, and it was horrific. You couldn't watch it. And I remember telling him, I say, hey man, that was difficult to watch. He goes, yeah, he knew that. He goes, that's why I chose the tame one. That's the reason I didn't show you a really hard one. This one was tame. What's happening to children across this country, it's untenable. It's demonic. P. Diddy doesn't hold a candle to Becerra.
The ranking member ripped on the Trump appointees in his opening remarks, which we largely expected. But I just asked the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, do you have a medical degree?
I do not.
You do not have a medical degree. Are you familiar with the Florida grand jury presentment that they did about a year and a half ago in 2023 in regards to unaccompanied alien children?
I'm somewhat familiar with it. I was briefed on it on many occasions.
Are you familiar that in that report, it revealed that children were pimped out by their aunt, which it turns out the aunt wasn't even related to the child, the so-called aunt? Are you familiar with that story that was in there?
There are a number of incidents that are reported in that Florida report. Some of them I can probably recall better than others. Some of them I would challenge and dispute, but that one I don't remember.
And do you remember the teenage girl that was in a house with unknown men with no private bedroom for her? Are you familiar with the sponsors that utilize a strip club in Jacksonville as an address for where this child, where a child should be settled?
Congressman, as I said, I don't have the information on that Florida grand jury report in front of me. I certainly can go back and take a look at it.
Forget about P. Diddy. You're watching the monster. Secretary Becerra. He's the monster. P. Diddy is just kind of low-hanging fruit, as they say. Easy to nab. You want to know where the devil lurks? In plain sight. Right in front of you. This is horrific. He can't even tell you why a minor was dropped off at a strip club as a residence and a place to settle. Because to him, it doesn't really matter. You already heard it. To him, it's a conveyor belt. Get the kids in. Give them a sponsor, vaguely vetted, and after that, that's it. There's nothing we can do. The devil's never obvious. It's always wearing a sheep clothing. I'm here just to help the kids. Look at him, he sits there, shameless. What do you mean you don't have the documentation? You knew you were going to be here. You knew you were going to be here. You knew there was going to be a hearing, and you knew we were going to ask you questions about this. How is it that you don't have that documentation in front of you? Because the documentation doesn't matter. Just let that sink in. The documentation doesn't matter. His charter was to get him in, get him situated, move on to the next one.
Try to get back to you.
Are you familiar that the case managers are only performing home studies, or the case managers are only doing case studies or home studies in 4.5% of placements in Florida? Only 4.5%. In fact, discretionary home studies were 1%. Is that all you folks are checking up on, these kids that are so vulnerable?
Congressman, thank you for the question. Congress, in passing the laws that apply to the unaccompanied children, said that home studies would be reserved for those children who came to us with circumstances that showed trauma or the need for additional services. So by law, by statute passed by you in Congress, those of you in Congress in the past, we have the obligation to conduct these home studies only in those particular cases. We provide a home study.
So you decided to do the minimum.
No, that's
1%. That's
was
what you
about to
said.
go there.
Okay, here's the law. That's all we're going to do. In the meantime, you got kids being placed in addresses like a strip club in Jacksonville, Florida.
That's what I was trying to say, is that's not the case.
In your testimony.
We do home studies at our discretion. Most of
Hold on a second. Let's rewind that.
1%. That's
was
what you
about to go
said.
there.
Okay, here's the law. That's all we're going to do. In the meantime, you got kids being placed in addresses like a strip club in Jacksonville, Florida.
That's what I was trying to say, is that's not the case.
In your testimony.
We do home studies at our discretion.
They do home studies at their discretion. And the congressman just told you you're doing it in like 4% of the places that you're leaving these kids. How? Just, you know what? Because I don't work for the HHS. I don't know. Can you explain that part to me? Who drops off a child and you don't even know who's there? And how, let me ask you this. I'm sorry. Let's just go for the obvious. Strip clubs are publicized in brick and mortar establishments. In other words, I remember going down one street and we would see it was called, I think, Shangri-La or something like that. Like, they advertise it. A strip club isn't bashful about being a strip club. They want everyone to know. How do you drop off a child there? If you thought that I was being hyperbolic saying that our government has been trafficking minors, unaccompanied minors from these third world countries, that's not hyperbolic. Strip clubs are advertising to the world. Signs everywhere. Who drops off a child at one? P. Diddy is low-hanging fruit. I'm sorry, I got to keep on hammering this nail. These are the devils.
Most of the time, we have to we have to wait till we have the funding. No, we have the funding to do those discretionary home studies, but we've expanded them, and that's why the foundational rule has become so important.
In your testimony, you said you coordinate with the states and local municipalities to make sure that you're working with them. In this Florida presentment, it says neither U.S. Department of Homeland Security or HHS actively coordinates or consults with the state on the UAC that are resettled in Florida. Did you see that part of the study? You aren't coordinating with them? Why are you not coordinating with them?
I find that hard to believe because remember, we used...
Whoa. He finds that hard to believe. You don't know? No. If you're head of any department, you're head of everything. When he said, I find that hard to believe, it means he doesn't know. You know, I was having a cigar the other day with a guy, he's a teacher, and you can tell he loves teaching. You can tell it. It's written all over his face, man. He loves teaching kids, and he teaches government, and he's really passionate about it, and you can tell. And we're all sitting down having a cigar, and I disagreed with him politically on some issues. a lot of issues, actually. But one thing was clear. He wasn't trying to indoctrinate children. He was just giving them, this is what the Constitution says. You come to your own conclusion. He's like passionate about it. See, that's what you want in a teacher. That's what you want in a doctor. That's what you want from an attorney. That's what you want from an elected official. But you're not getting that with this Becerra character. You're getting a guy who wanted to be high profile and collect a check for it. I find that hard to believe. So you're not even checking? You don't even know? He should have been able to say, no, not true. Or, yes, that's true. I've been looking into that, and he doesn't even know.
To have programs in Florida that had licensed care facilities, Florida decided to unlicense these facilities, and so we've been in constant touch with Florida.
So you said you've seen some of the what was presented here. Do you dispute the study from Florida?
I have a number of issues with the Florida report.
If you would share with me, and at an appropriate time, not today, if you want to share with me all the things you dispute in that study, that presentment by Florida, I would really like to see it. Because then I want to take it to Florida and ask them, what were you lying about? Because obviously you're telling me that there's some misrepresentation by Florida here. Is that right?
Well, one thing you could really help us with is checking.
Yes or no? Are Florida law enforcement lying? Yes or no? Don't stop tap dancing. God.
That study, that presentment by Florida, I would really like to see it. Because then I want to take it to Florida and ask them, what were you lying about? Because obviously you're telling me that there's some misrepresentation by Florida here. Is that right?
Well, one thing you could really help us with is checking with Florida to find out why they decided to not allow licensed caregivers be part of our program.
That's your job. Oh my. Look, he's saying, you know, you can get back to me on that. He's out. He's done this for 4 years. The numbers are ungodly. A couple of weeks, he's out. He's not going to get back to you. He's scot-free. He trafficked hundreds of thousands of children. Put them in unsafe environments without any background check. I'm going to show you something else. Like,
all the kids that we place in care, we try to place in licensed care.
Do you believe you're in charge of an assembly line, as the chairman alluded to?
If I could just conclude, but the important thing about Florida is Florida took affirmative action to unlicense centers.
I'll wait for your answer in regards to Florida offline here. That'll be just fine. I want to ask you the Harris question. Would you change anything that you've done over the last 4 years in regards to illegal immigration?
Recognizing that we don't deal with immigration, that is part of DHS's authority. We deal with the care, the human services side of care for kids.
Would you change anything that you've done in the last 4 years with 320,000 children unaccounted for by your administration?
We work tirelessly to strengthen and improve the program of the UC, the unaccompanied children that come before us. And we work really hard to make sure we, first and foremost, protect the safety and the well-being of those kids. Every day is a challenge, and we do the best we can.
for those of you not paying attention, that's a no. Just like Kamala Harris says. Is there anything you would do differently? Nothing comes to mind. You put hundreds of thousands of kids in unbelievable situations, and they're going to be there. Like you're going to need some sort of special task force, some sort of, you know what Trump is going to have to do? He's going to have to create a department to go get those kids. I don't know another way. What do? You just leave them? Do you just leave them? Yeah, you're out, so we just leave them? He just told you. I wouldn't change anything.
You mentioned the state of Florida in the context of, I think you characterized it as not being willing to work with HHS. On March 29th, 2023, a Florida grand jury released a report detailing the impact of the UAC influx at the southern border. The grand jury made some of the following conclusions of the Office of Refugee Resettlement, the component agency within HHS entrusted to you, Mr. Secretary. Excerpt, quote, a disturbing pattern has emerged whereby the same sponsor applies to receive multiple UACs, sometimes at the same address, sometimes at a different one. Some individual sponsors apply to receive more than one child at more than one address simultaneously. One address in Texas had 44 children sent to it. Another had 25. One sponsor in Bonita Springs, Florida had multiple children sent to multiple addresses, and he applied using different versions of his hyphenated surname. One address in Austin, Texas, a town which I represent, had more than 100 UAC released to a single family dwelling. Mr. Secretary, is this remotely consistent with the claims by your department that you're doing everything in your power to ensure child security?
I hate to do this, but that bears repeating.
You mentioned the state of Florida in the context of, I think you characterized it as not being willing to work with HHS. On March 29th, 2023, a Florida grand jury released a report detailing the impact of the UAC influx at the southern border. The grand jury made some of the following conclusions of the Office of Refugee Resettlement, the component agency within HHS entrusted to you, Mr. Secretary. Excerpt, quote, a disturbing pattern has emerged whereby the same sponsor applies to receive multiple UACs, sometimes at the same address, sometimes at a different one. Some individual sponsors apply to receive more than one child at more than one address simultaneously. One address in Texas had 44 children sent to it. Another had 25. One sponsor in Bonita Springs, Florida had multiple children sent to multiple addresses, and he applied using different versions of his hyphenated surname. One address in Austin, Texas, a town which I represent, had more than 100 UAC released to a single family dwelling. Mr. Secretary, is this remotely consistent with the claims by your department that you're doing everything in your power to ensure child security?
Any of you that thought I was being hyperbolic, any of you that thought I was, overstating facts, can you explain that part to me? In just some sort of rational way. How does one resident get 25 kids in a single family dwelling using different surnames? How does that happen? Where are those kids? I mean, once you got the first or second one, where are the kids that were left in their care? Am I being too particular? Am I asking too much? Where are the kids? And by the way, you heard him. It was a pattern. You still think I'm being hyperbolic? You know, I'm, you know, I always kind of thought, you know, God, please bring us, don't allow us to elect Kamala. It would have been, we would have had another 500,000 unaccompanied minors trafficked. It's, and I really believe now it was a God move. What do you do with those kids?
Congressman, thank you for the question. All potential sponsors, anyone who wishes to apply to sponsor a child, must undergo extensive vetting process that follows child welfare best practices. We use a variety of tools. We try to monitor as best we can. And recently, through the foundational rule, we have established an even more extensive process for vetting as well.
Do you believe that the HHS foundational rule from April 30th of 2024 is consistent with what you just said in terms of background checks? Is it sufficient?
The foundational rule is what we've built to try to give us a better way to not only care for kids, but also make sure.
Does it require full public records background checks?
I'm sorry?
Does it require full public records background checks and FBI national criminal history checks?
As I said, we follow child welfare best practices when it comes to.
Yes or no, though? Do you do the full criminal history checks for the potential sponsors of these children?
Well, yes, we follow best practices.
Right. The answer is no.
It's a yes, we follow child welfare best practices.
Yeah, that's not my question. My question is, do you do background checks, the full criminal records, public background checks for the FBI National Criminal History?
We certainly check for criminal records. We check for sex offender in the sex offender registry. We do, again, the different things that the foundation.
The rule I'm talking about says you do not.
I'm sorry?
The rule that we're talking about that was released on April 30th, 2024 says you do not.
We do not what?
That you do not carry out FBI national criminal history checks for all potential sponsors.
We do background checks on every individual.
Right, but that's a slippery description. What I'm saying is this rule is pretty clear in what it's saying that you do not provide the kind of background checks, which, by the way, has created the problems. Let me move on because in the interest of time. Are you familiar with Maria Gonzalez, an 11-year-old girl who lived in Pasadena, Texas? In August 2023, Ms. Gonzalez was allegedly raped and murdered by Juan Carlos Garcia Rodriguez, a Guatemalan national who appealed at the southern border as a UAC in January of 2023 and was 17 years old. A month later, HHS released Garcia Rodriguez to a sponsor with a criminal history and who previously had 2 other UACs in his care, failed to enroll them in school as required by HHS. How about the situation with respect to another individual, Kayla Hamilton? Are you familiar with Walter Javier Martinez? Martinez was a 17-year-old from El Salvador who appeared at the border as a UAC in March of 2022. Months later, in July 22, he raped and murdered Kayla Hamilton, a 20-year-old woman in Maryland. After Martinez's release from the border and before Mrs. Hamilton's tragic death, HHS released him to a sponsor in May of 2022. Despite Martinez having gang tattoos and an arrest record for illicit association with MS-13. Mr. Secretary, how can you credibly claim that HHS is working to protect these children? And by the way, children we're talking about in the order of magnitude of 400 and something thousand children, which you are dismissing that they are lost. Let me ask you a very specific question, Mr. Secretary. Can you account for the whereabouts of those 400 and something thousand children? The 320,000 that were put in the report by the Inspector General, the 85,000 that we've talked about before in 2023. Do you know where all of these children are and that they are safe? Yes or no?
Congressman, as I explained the process, we get these kids when they are referred to us by the Department of Homeland Security. We then provide them with care while they are in our custody. We lose custody of those kids once we find a vetted sponsor with whom they can stay.
Is that clean? Is that plain for you now? Homeland Security gives us the kids. We do a slipshod background check on the sponsor. Then that's it. We don't know where they are. That's it. You pay that guy's salary. You pay that guy's salary. I mean, this is like demonic. And it's in your face. I didn't see anything on CNN, MSNBC. This guy is a demon. He's there to pick, get a check and go home at 5. And since he wants really good numbers, he wants people to work for him that don't see these kids as human beings, but parts on a conveyor belt. No, he didn't answer that question. Imagine if you were in charge of 20 kids. And after 2 years, some government official came to you and asked you, where are the 20 kids we dropped off? What if you said, well, we found some places to put them. We don't know what happened to them after that. You mean to tell me you didn't check, you didn't do a follow-up, you didn't do any, just, well, once we drop them off, we don't have any contact anymore. We don't have custody. It's out of our hands. I don't know how you overstate this. I don't know how you do that. Your government is trafficking unaccompanied minors. And I have no evidence, but my guess is somehow, some way, through some circuitous kind of web, the Mexican cartels are reaping the profits. That much I can guarantee you. This should be infuriating to you. But in a few weeks, he's out. He did what everybody wanted him to do. He did exactly what he wanted them to do. He just, like a conveyor belt. He put those kids on a conveyor belt. It's just, I need you to remember, he left a minor at a strip club. How do you knowingly, imagine I gave you, hey, there's a kid and he needs to be placed, and here's the address. Any of you out there, any of you. So here's a kid. He's 6 years old. Juan, whatever, and he's from Guatemala, ostensibly, and here's the address. And so you put him in the car and you go driving, and it's a strip club. A strip club. Do you drop them off there? No, that's the address they gave me. Or do you put the kid back in the car and drive him back to the department? It must have been wrong. It must have been a mistake. That was a strip bar. That's a demon on your screen right there. You know, something tells me that this video is probably going to get, 13, 14 views. When I did that video about Kamala Harris she was polled being +3 in Iowa. At the end of the day, I always, check. It had like 16 views. And I laid out why I'm just pointing it out. This is bunk. No way she's +3. 16 views. So I'm going to ask you guys to do me a favor. I'm going to ask you to share this video, particularly with your leftist friends that are so saddened that they don't get their woman of color in the White House. And just tell them, with Kamala there, this just would have continued. They probably would have built several more conveyor belts. Dear Lord.
So Mika and Joe went down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring. It's the last time I ever watched Morning Joe. Period. End of statement. Unreal. Unreal. For months you were telling us he's the worst thing that could happen to this country and democracy. And then you go kiss his ring? Despicable. Despicable you. Both of you.
Well, weary MSNBC stars Joe and Minka returned to their penthouse amid fears of major cuts as Rachel Maddow's jaw-dropping new salary is revealed. MSNBC, I can't imagine that they will survive this, because now they are going to have to stand on their own too. For those of you who don't know, Comcast is cutting ties, so they will no longer be associated with NBC. You see, being associated, being connected to NBC, they could pay these hefty salaries. Being connected to NBC, they had these, really cool looking sets and lights and camera and all this kind of stuff. They were doing really, really well. But what ends up happening when you no longer have that? You no longer have the pockets of NBC. Wow. Joe Scarborough and Minka Brzezinski sported glum looks as they returned to their Manhattan penthouse, their Manhattan penthouse. They had a penthouse in Manhattan. I'm sure that they really understand the average Joe. After MSNBC's reportedly slash fellow star Rachel Maddow's salary amid sagging ratings, the pair's secret Mar-a-Lago meeting with Donald Trump has resulted in viewers abandoning the liberal network, and critics accused them of hypocrisy, even though they dismissed the controversy on their show Thursday. I showed you, the lunatic Rosie O'Donnell. What despicable people you are. You went and talked to him? How dare you? How dare you? It's like, those are the people they've been cultivating. And Joe and Minka have created this monster. These monster viewers that are highly intolerant of any opposing worldview. These are the people you've been courting. People just like Rosie O'Donnell. And I gotta show you, man, their careers could be in flux as parent company Comcast looks set to spin off MSNBC amid radical changes, which led to co-host and to joke they could lose their very penthouse earlier this week. The salaries for key talent appeared set for cutbacks, mirroring rival CNN, with Maddow, that's Rachel Maddow, signing a new deal that will slash her pay from $30 million annually to $25 million. Now, what does that tell you? I'm sorry, let me read this again. The salaries for key talent appear set for cutbacks, mirroring rival CNN, with Rachel Maddow, signing a new deal which will slash her pay from 30 to 25 million. She signed it. What does that tell you? MSNBC is not the only leftist organization. ABC is leftist. NBC is leftist. CBS is leftist. They all voted for Kamala. Why did she sign? Hey, let me put it to you a different way. Because she's at the peak, right? This is like the peak career. Well, when an NFL player is at the peak, I mean the height of his popularity, where his numbers are through the roof and he has to renegotiate his contract, it's never for less money. In fact, if the contract isn't a significant upgrade, he starts shopping to other teams. My question to you is, why would she sign it? Why not just go to ABC? I mean, you're the great Rachel Maddow. You command the attention of millions. Why not just go to CBS? I'm sure they'd be glad to get a hard-hitting journalist like yourself. But why in the world would you sign this? Unless she knows there are no other offers. She knows that she is wildly overpriced. Wildly. $30 million a year for Rachel Maddow? $30 million? And they're only going to cut her by 5? Is she really worth $25 million? You tell me. Is she worth $25 million? No. Still, you don't know that. You don't know that. You don't know that. Yes, I do. It just told you right there. You just have to read between the lines. With Maddow signing a new deal, she signed it because she knows, man, this is the best gig in town. I'm not going to get this kind of money anywhere else. I'm signing. She'd be a fool not to. Let me ask you, what happened with Don Lemon when he left CNN, when he was booted? Why didn't he go to MSNBC? Why didn't he go to ABC or CBS? There are other news organizations around this country. Why didn't he go there? Because he couldn't. Now you see how these people were propped up in the first place. Like, holy cow. An anonymous executive called Maddow ratings Viagra, regularly drawing significantly more viewers than the rest of the network's primetime lineup. I mean, imagine, like, I don't know because it doesn't say, but how much is Joy Reid worth? Is she really worth $1 million? Are those the eyeballs that she's bringing in? I mean, isn't she better suited to be, on The View? She could replace, Whoopi. She should just replace Whoopi. Interesting. You really wouldn't even see any real difference. And this is what they should do. They should stop trying to hold themselves out as a news organization. They need to stop pretending that they are a news organization, because we all know they're not. They're content creators. Joy Reid is a rapid, unalloyed racist. It's clear. She said Kamala Harris ran a flawless campaign while she had Queen Latifah. I mean, when Queen Latifah endorses you, that's it. The country is going to fall right in line. It's like, who? Most of the Americans across this country were like, I'm sorry, who? She was a big, big name back in the 90s. The beginning 90s. She's big. I mean, relatively speaking. Joy Reid said, with Queen Latifah, that's it, man. It's over. Imagine being that detached from reality. Amid the embarrassment, DailyMail.com spotted 57-year-old Brzezinski looking downcast as the couple entered their New York City building Wednesday. She glared at photographers. Hold on a second, because, okay. Okay, so she's wearing, very, very trendy clothes, and he's wearing a dapper blue suit, and he kept his head down as they walked into their Manhattan penthouse, and everybody, I guess, loves them. And it was revealed Thursday that ratings for Morning Joe have dropped 15% overall and a whopping 41% in the 25 to 54-year-old demographic. That's the coveted demographic. 25 to 54. That's the coveted demographic. That's where those are the people you want. The cable's new crave since meeting with Trump was revealed. You just saw what happened when they revealed. They should have just never said it. I don't know what they were thinking. Why in the world would you tell the people you just visited Mar-a-Lago? Why would you do that? And what's worse, did he reach out to you or did you reach out to him? My guess is it was the latter. They probably reached out to him. You know why? Those ratings, man. Those ratings. Nobody trusts MSNBC. Here, hey, hold on, because this is a headline. This is a headline from MSNBC. Lincoln Riley's killer never stood a chance. You know, that was the young woman who was in nursing school and was murdered brutally by this illegal. MSNBC said the killer never had a chance. They had to actually come back and revise that. They got so much backlash. If you want to know why NBC is running for the hills, you want to know why NBC is doing everything in their power to shed the MSNBC moniker, that headline tells you everything you need to know. Good God, have mercy. The show went from 770,000 viewers on Monday to 680 on Tuesday and 647 on Wednesday. Like, people are just leaving. A source told the Angler that the Morning Joe rebrand of making peace with Trump is part of the network having a come to Jesus moment, going too far to the left during the election. That wasn't during the election. It wasn't because they went left during the election. They called him Hitler. Joe called him a fascist. Why in the world would you call a meeting with Hitler? Unless you were just lying to your viewers. Trying to get those sweet, sweet, sweet clicks. The relevance of cable news is over. It is now a podcast world. And I gotta tell you, good riddance. Good riddance. They are collapsing. You tell me why you think Rachel Maddow signed that check, signed that contract. She knows that's the best she's going to get, and she ain't worth $25 million a year. Good God. All right, guys, if you would like to know what cigar I'm smoking, this is called Black Abyss. The Black Abyss. Connecticut. For those of you who don't know, when they say Connecticut, that is the shade of the wrapper. It is a Connecticut shade. And this is very good. This is a good, solid smoke. The draw is good. The draw is fabulous. Now, I haven't had a whole bunch of these. But this is a solid smoke. I mean, if you got one, I don't think you would be, disappointed. It's nothing to write home about, but this is a very solid smoke. I got to tell you guys, and I just have to reiterate, your government was trafficking children. And somebody's going to have to pay for that. Either in this life or the next. All right, guys, that's it for now. If you like this video, smash that like button and subscribe. And if you're following me on Rumble, please press that follow button. And until the next time, God bless.